Hello, thank you that you want to see and hear something what is called the esoteric lessons of the first class of the School of Spiritual Science, which was given by Rudolf Steiner, 1924. Today we will work on lesson number 13. And to work on this lesson, it would be very nice and helpful if it's possible for you to also have a look to the lessons number 1 to number 12. And before that, it's best, if it's possible, and you want to do it, to work on spiritual science. That means the science about the spiritual world, about the soul and the spirit and I of the human being, about the question of the knowledge about human being and knowledge about the world and cosmos, which you can find in several different ways of works and letters and lessons about the spiritual world, and especially also in the Anthroposophy and the works from Rudolf Steiner. So today we will work on lesson 13. And to come into the right consciousness and the right mood about something what we really can call a worship to God, the Christian Michaelic worship. We will work first in some words of truth, a part of the foundation stone from Rudolf Steiner in the beginning. In the turn of time occurred the world's spirit light into the earthly stream of beings. Night darkness had ended its prevail. The brightest light streamed into human souls, light that warms the poor shepherds' hearts, light that enlightens the wise kings' heads. Divine light, Christ Son, warm our hearts, enlighten our heads, though that good will be what we through our hearts rise, what we through our heads purposefully want to lead. My dear friends, first of all we shall speak the imperative words from the spirit of the cosmos, which urges us to self-observation for knowledge of our being. The first word. O man, know yourself. So resounds the word. You hear it soul powerful. You feel it spirit wasteness. Who speaks so word fastly? Who speaks so felt heartily? Does it act through space distant radiation in your senses being experience? Does it sound through time's wave weaves into your life's evolving stream? Is it you yourself who in space feeling, in experiencing time, creating the world, feeling for aim, sensing in space's emptiness of soul, because you have the force of thinking, losing in the time-destroying stream. Well, my dear sisters and brothers, in the previous lesson we tried to find the inner psychic word which can bring our humanity into contact with what is revealed by the spiritual hierarchies, with which the human spirit is closely related. We placed before our souls how by concentrating on the field of thinking we could rise up the region where the beings of the third hierarchy reside, so to speak, the angels, archangels and archai. Not meant is our everyday thinking, but the thinking which acts behind that everyday thinking, which we can only achieve from our whole being by meditating deeply on the words which begin with "Here the field of thinking." And I also pointed out last time how this thinking can be perceived in the human organism itself above the region of speech, whereas the field of memory thought can be felt under the region of speech. In respect of the region of speech itself, when we say something innerly and intensely in a low voice or even out loud, we feel the speaking within, and we can designate the place where we feel the speaking within us. Then we have a starting point, for it is more or less easy to experience this speech. And over the speaking, more towards the rear of the head, we can find the inner thinking through which we can discover the angeloi. In the speaking itself, the archangeloi, and in remembrance, under the speaking, the archai can be felt. And the mantric verse which leads us to this point was described in the previous class lesson. By means of this verse we imagine how at first cosmic space speaks. The universe itself resounds to us, though to speak, and therewith the guardian of the threshold tells us to be attentive to what the beings related to us from the ranks of the third hierarchy, the angeloi, have to say. Then secondly, how the guardian of the threshold again admonishes us to be attentive to the beings related to us from the ranks of the Archangeloi. And thirdly, the guardian again admonishes us to listen attentively to the beings related to us from the ranks of the Archai. So we should imagine the mantric verse so that we hear the universe from the distant cosmos resounding to us, and hear the guardian and the hierarchies speaking. Hear the field of thinking. It speaks, who shows the ways from Earth's existence to Earth's existence. In spirit light wants to guide. Look at your senses' lightful being. It speaks who the two souls in the matter-freed realm of being at soul's wings wants to carry. Look at your thinking force affecting. It speaks who among spirits in earth's distant creation fields the existence ground wants to give you. Look at the remembrance image shapes. So if we can always feel ourselves in this situation, the cosmic distances speak to us, the guardian of the threshold speaking to us, the ranks of the hierarchies speaking to us. If we can vividly imagine it as though or it were around us, then in relation to the schematic picture I drew on the blackboard the last time, we gradually come to the sense, the thinking above the place of speech in the back of the head, through which we approach the movement and the life in the third hierarchy. And so, my dear sisters and brothers, we can say that by means of this mantric verse we come in contact with the beings of the third hierarchy. Likewise do we come into contact with the beings of the second hierarchy through the second mantric verse, which was also set forth and which should also be felt and spiritually perceived. We should ignore the fact that we are saying it. We should transpose ourselves into the situation I described. Hear the field of feeling. It speaks who a thought from spirit sun rays calls you to cosmic existence. Feel in your breath life vitality. It speaks who cosmic existence from the stars' living forces, the in spiritual realm gives. Feel in your bloods wave, weaving. It speaks who thee, the spiritual sense, in lightful gods, hides kingdoms, out of earthly will, wants to create. Feel the earth's mighty resistance. Thus we come into contact with the exousiae, dynamis, curiotetis. An inner connection is created between the feeling sphere, breathing and blood circulation, and where the will arises, but which is only felt as will, and through which a connection is created between everything in our humanity and the beings of the second hierarchy. What remains for us to consider today, my dear sisters and brothers, is the field of volition, of will. The field of the will is the one which most dominates the human being, which acts most strongly in him, but is also the one which is least experienced with real attention. For man usually knows little of how the will acts. Let us take first where the will is most evident in the human organism, that is, when the human organism is set in motion. You must, my dear sisters and brothers, adopt these intimate concepts if you want to penetrate into what the Spirit, which speaks through this esoteric school, wishes to indicate as the path. Imagine yourself walking and perhaps moving your arms. Normally, we think that we move our legs and the legs carry us forwards. This is the most convenient idea one can have. Convenient idea one can have. We think that an unknown force, it is of course an unknown force, for nobody with normal consciousness can know anything about this force, streams into the legs. Each leg is placed before the other. Thus we carry ourselves through the world. But such is not the case. In no way do the legs have the primary task of carrying us through the world. It is simply not true. Here we come to a subject where normal consciousness immediately shows its Maya. For it is Maya when we believe that we walk with the legs, with the physical legs, that the physical legs exist for walking. Of course, this does not mean, my dear sisters and brothers, that you should go out into the world of triviality and cry out loud, "It's not true that man has the legs in order to walk." For that would, of course, not be understood at first, because the profound sense in which it is true is unknown, that almost everything normal consciousness offers us at first is Maya, the great illusion. The great illusion does not only include what we observe around us, but also how we experience ourselves in the world. Imagine the following. a circle with short lines, 90 degrees out of it. These are human legs, where each one strides before the other. These white legs, like moving, but within the physical human legs is the human etheric body. And the part of the human etheric body that corresponds to the legs. And there is the astral body. It's also at the red is etheric fields, and the yellow is now the astral body, and the part which corresponds to the legs, and then the eye organization. It also together with this parts, and is now violet. We don't walk with these physical legs. We don't walk with the etheric legs, not even with the astral legs, but we walk with the forces that correspond to the eye organization. We live with these forces which correspond to the eye organization. We live with these forces in the gravitational forces of the earth, which are course invisible. The gravitational forces of the earth we experience with our eye organization forces, and the will which governs movement, which acts between the invisible eye organization and the invisible gravitation forces of the earth. Now the eye organization is so constituted that it needs to feel something like resistance when it comes into contact with the earth's gravitation forces. The legs, astral bodies, serve this purpose, also the etheric body and especially the physical body, in order that the eye organization can feel itself, can perceive itself, and without this perception it could not have a connection with the earth's organization, because it must be conscious of this connection, in order that in walking the eye organization may be conscious of itself and come into contact with the earth organization. The physical and the other organizations are present. Therefore, walking is a super sensible process. The sensible organization is only present in order that a walking be perceived, because it can be accomplished only when it is perceived. You no more walk with your legs, my dear sisters and brothers, than you do with your stockings. You walk with what corresponds to your eye organization in your legs. And just as you have stockings to provide warmth, so do you have physical legs in order to provide consciousness for walking. When I have just said must be felt. What I have just said must be felt. We must learn to feel when walking that walking is a super sensible process, and that the sensible is only there in order to provide consciousness of the process. During walking, earth lives, this consciousness is created in a less than perfect way, because our legs are also heavy. So we not only come into contact with the gravitation pull of the earth, but also with the gravitation force that acts in our legs. Therefore, when we are not using our physical legs, as in sleep we speed around the universe in the eye and astral body in a much more agile way than when we move about in physical life. We do move about during sleep, only we have to consciousness of doing so because the physical legs provide the consciousness. Who is it when who provides us with the capacity of movement during sleep and then also during clairvoyance? We are able to move, I said, in physical life because the movement becomes conscious through the physical legs. Who, my dear friends, does that instead when we are sleeping? Those beings who connect with us for the purpose of movement when we are sleeping. They are the thrones, beings of the first hierarchy. However, with normal consciousness, with normal sleeping consciousness, man cannot perceive the thrones. Therefore, it does not help. But when through intuition he is capable of perceiving what happens during sleep, he becomes aware that during sleep he is in contact with a higher world through the thrones. Just as in physical life, he is in contact with normal earth life through his physical legs. All this must translate into feeling. We must learn to sense it, and then we will sense the interweaving, undulation, spiritual world in which we always are. And we can again rise to such an inner feeling, an experience, if we let it work upon us in this situation, as we did in respect to the other mantrams which I described for the field of thinking and the field of feeling. From out of the cosmos comes an urgent voice like thunder. Then the guardian of the threshold tells us to listen to the thrones speaking to us. The thrones speak to us about the drives, as they are called, the instinctual drives which are transferred to our volition when we carry out in act of will. Therefore, we will let the third part of the mantra work on us, as it resounds again from the cosmos. Hear the field of will, then guardian of the threshold. It speaks who the world forces, the dump, from the earth's undergrounds, the sinister, into your limbs, activities, guides. Look at your drives, fire being. That is the first. The second leads us more into the soul aspect. If we continue to investigate the human's will, actions in the deep meditative practice, we make a great discovery. And at some point humanity must make this discovery if it wishes to advance in the field of evolution. Now I must indicate something to you, my dear sisters and brothers, something you all know, for normal consciousness is already aware of it. It is what we call the voice of consciousness in us. The voice of consciousness, but the voice of consciousness calls out in an indeterminate way to human consciousness. Usually we do not rightly know what it is in respect to our moral, physical comportment that comes from the mysterious depths of our soul, and which we call the voice of conscience. With normal consciousness, one does not penetrate so deeply into one's own being as to reach the voice of conscience. It ascends, but man does not reach it, so he does not look at it face to face. And when man penetrates meditatively to the distant world of the cherubim, the wisdom-filled beings who live and act throughout the universe, he makes the great discovery that from the world of the cherubim an impulse enters into him, within which the voice of conscience lives. Oh, the voice of conscience is of high origin, high being. It actually lives in the world of the cherubim. From that world of the cherubim, it weaves itself into humanity, and at first resounds from the depths of this humanity in an indeterminate way, but it is a great, mighty encounter when man, through initiation, can come into contact with the field of the cherubim and encounter the world where his conscience lives and works. It is the greatest personal discovery anyone can make. Therefore, the guardian of the threshold admonishes us with the following words. It speaks. Who the spirits raise, the bright, from God's activity fields, graciously let circulate in our blood. Look at conscience, soul, guidance. In truth, it is the spirit from the field of cherubim that circulates in the blood, that constitutes the voice of conscience. The blood is physical in all the parts of our body, but in that it is physical in all the parts of our body. It carries the voice of conscience along with other things, and the waves of cherubim interweave in our blood. We will gain an important place for this meditation if we imagine the situation thus. First speaks what originates in the universal distances. Hear the field of will. The guardian of the threshold admonishes us. It speaks who the world forces, the dump from the earth's undergrounds, the sinister, into your limbs, activities, guides. Then we imagine interweaving clouds symbolizing the thrones, and in that we imagine the interweaving clouds. We hear the thrones, the voices from the first hierarchy. Look at your tribe's fire being. Then the guardian of the threshold continues. It speaks who the spirits raise the bright from God's activity fields, graciously let circulate in your blood. Now we imagine lightning flashing through the clouds, for lightning is the tool of the cherubim. The fiery sword of the cherubim, as the lightning flashes through the clouds, we feel these flashes in the words. Look at conscience, soul, guidance. Then the guardian of the threshold speaks. It speaks who the human being, the accomplished, that is the previous earth's lives, through death and birth, accordingly brings to breath in present time. Now we imagine the entire sky above the lightning, with interweaving worms, sending the lightning down with heat, and in this interweaving heat from the cosmos we sense the seraphim's speech. Look at your destinies, spiritual examination. How destiny extends from the earth life to earth life, to the present earth life. This mantra is especially effective when it is felt combined in this way with the image, and we can prepare ourselves for this mantra by using the good words seeds, after denuding it of all triviality. Instead of thrones, say seeds. So imagine, my dear sisters and brother, that you feel the word seeds. Seeds will be written on the board. Flashes in the cloud, from the idea of clouds, in your mind the word lightning. Lightning will be written on the board. Again with the idea of flashing through, the lightning flashing in the clouds. You form the word heat. Heat will be written on board. Universal heat, and feel in this threefold I, you must pronounce and feel it at an I. The ascending from the cloud flashes to the lightning bolts, to the universal heat, from which the lightning bolts derive. You feel prepared for the mantra. Seeds, lightning, heat. And then after this scene is before you, feel with the image the force of the mantra. It now will be written on board. 3. Hear the field of will. It speaks who the world forces, the dump, from the earth's undergrounds, the sinister, into your limbs, activities, guides. Look at your drive's fire being. It speaks who the spirits raise the bright from God's activity fields graciously let circulate in your blood. Look at conscience, soul, guidance. It speaks who the human being, the accomplished, through deaths and births, accordingly brings to breath in present time. Look at your destinies, spiritual examination. Nothing in such verses is merely empty phrase. Rather is it about the limbs, activity, movement. I described it as a working together of the I organization with the forces of the earth, a supersensible process. We must be aware of that in the first part of the mantra. In the second part of the mantra we must be aware of the blood circulating throughout the whole organism, containing everything pertaining to the conscience. However, our destiny basically lives in our breathing. The uppermost part of our rhythmic system, insofar as it is streamed through not only with what today enlives us in breathing, but because breathing has been formed by earlier stages of earthly existence. Here, in part 1, the guardian of the threshold refers us to the thrones. Will be written thrones to the first part. And here in the second part to the cherubim. Cherubim will be written beside the second part. And here the third part, seraphim. Seraphim will be written to the third part. The symbol who choose to give the mantra the necessary strength and spiritual consolidation, and which expresses the first hierarchy's revelation in a beautiful way. Clouds, but at the same time what the thrones derive their substance from. When we observe the spiritual in the clouds, their own being or essence. And it will be written on board, clouds, thrones, being. We look up to the lightning bolts, or the cherubim are already more hidden. We can sense how the thrones are acting and moving in the clouds. The looming clouds provide the thrones with substance. The cherubim do not make it easy for us to see them. They are more hidden than the thrones. They are not show themselves in the formations. They show us their tools in the lightning bolts. They do not show us their being in the lightning bolts, only their tools. So it will be written on board, lightning, cherubim, tools. And if we ascend the cosmic heat, the seraphim are hidden deeply therein, much deeper than the cherubim, are hidden behind their tools. The lightning bolts, the heat is only the shining of the seraphim. The thrones reveal themselves by their being. The cherubim reveal themselves by their tools. The seraphim reveal themselves by their appearance, their shining, their Maya. Heat, it will be written on board, heat, seraphim, appearance. Thus we establish the connection between man and the first hierarchy in the field of will. Here the field of will, it speaks who the world forces the dump. From the earth's underground the sinister, into your limbs activities guides. Look at your tribe's fire being. It speaks who the spirits raise the bright from God's activity fields graciously let circulate in your blood. Look at conscience's soul guidance. It speaks who the human being, the accomplished, through deaths and births, accordingly brings to breath in present time. Look at your destiny's spiritual examination. In this situation, it is necessary that we feel as though we are not ourselves speaking, thinking, feeling and willing, rather that we completely forget ourselves and feel spoken to in a resounding threefold way. Yes, my dear sisters and brothers, it is certainly necessary that such mantric procedures be taken most seriously. Then they are effective as they are meant to be. Then they bring us forward on the threefold fields of the spiritual world, on the fields of thinking, feeling and willing. And it is always necessary that we be able to undertake them earnestly. Something else is necessary which must be taken into account. The meditator will often fall back into the humdrum routine of everyday life. He must do so because between birth and death he is an earthly being. He must always return to his normal consciousness. For example, when we have some kind of ache which becomes chronic, we will always feel it. We can sometimes overlook it, but we feel that it is there. We can feel something similar when we have been embraced by the power of meditation. We should always be able to say to ourselves, the normal conscious has meditated. It has been embraced by the prevailing power of meditation. We should feel that the meditation is present, that we were once in it. By feeling that meditation makes us into something different, we should have become a different person. Having once begun, we can never in life forget, not even for a moment, my dear sisters and brothers, that we are meditants. That is the right attitude. We should live into meditative life in such a way, naturally for short enough intervals that it does not disturb our normal lives, that we always feel ourselves to be meditants, and when there are moments when we forget that we are meditants, then we should feel as ashamed as if we were walking completely naked along a street crowded with people. We should experience the transition from non-meditant to meditant in such a way that if we forgot that we are meditants and then realize that we have forgotten, we are ashamed. And then we will really advance in what is said to us by the cosmic words with which we began. O man, know yourself. So resounds the world word. You hear it, soul powerful. You feel it, spirit wasteness. Who speaks so word fastly? Who speaks so felt heartily? Does it act through space distant radiation? In your senses being experience? Does it sound through time's wave weaves into your life's evolving stream? Is it you yourself who in space feeling, in experiencing time, creating the word, feeling foreign, sensing in spaces emptiness of soul, because you have the force of thinking, losing in the time destroying stream. But we must always remember that knowledge is a serious thing, and that the world of great illusions, the world of Maya, will not deliver it to us. We must first arrive at the threshold where the guardian stands and that on the threshold all the deceptive forms with which normal sense perception and normal consciousness is full will disappear. Then we can perceive additional words from the same cosmic depths from which the words just spoken to us came. Recognize first the earnest guardian who stands before the gate of spirit's land, the entrance your senses forces and your mind's power refusing, because you are in senses weaving and in thoughts shaping from spaces beinglessness, from time's deception power, the truth of own being you must first forcefully conquer. And when we have heard such words, the answering words can reverently issue from the depths of our soul. I entered this senses world, the legacy of thinking, carrying with me a God's power had led me here. The death, it stands at the way's end. I won't feel the Christ being. It wakes in the matter's death, spirit birth. So in the spirit I find a world and recognize myself in world's creation. Thank you very much.